The apocalypse has come. Your culture is being wiped out, thanks to a vicious war. There is no hope. There is no future. That is until a single prophet stood right where I'm standing, right here, on this very rock, and gave hope to worried warriors. What followed would be known as the Battle of Tippecanoe. This is the somber tale of the Prophet's Rock. Shrouded in trees and overgrown woodland, a small piece of rock juts out over a short precipice. To understand the significance of this single rock, you must first understand everything that led to the Battle of Tippecanoe. In the year 1768, in the western Ohio Valley, a shooting star was born, Tecumseh of the Shawnee tribe. His father was Chief Puckashineway. He would be killed during the Dunsmore War at the Battle of Point Pleasant. His wife and Tecumseh's mother would migrate to Missouri, leaving him and all of his siblings behind. Tecumseh would soon become very close to his siblings. Tecumapis, his older sister, would teach him much about Shawnee culture. His older brother, Cheif, would teach him all he would know about combat and how to fight. As Tecumseh grew up, he began to hate the Americans after witnessing many atrocities that they had committed against the Shawnee and other native peoples. In the 1780s, Tecumseh and his brother would participate in many raids on American settlers. They would move down to Tennessee with a group of Shawnee warriors to join a band of Cherokee fighters. Cheif would be killed during one of these raids. This would lead to the Northwest Territory Indian Wars that would rage on throughout the late 1780s and early 1790s. Tecumseh would participate in many different battles. However, the final battle of the war would take place on August 20th of 1794, known as the Battle of Fallen Timbers, which took place near modern-day Toledo, Ohio. General Anthony Wayne, who commanded the newly formed army unit known as the Legion of the United States, would defeat the combined forces of the Miamis and Shawnee. This would result in the formation of the Treaty of Greenville, which forced many of the native tribes to give up much of their territory. However, Tecumseh refused to sign the treaty. He believed that none of the natives actually owned the land, and it belonged to all the native tribes. Nonetheless, they still abided by their treaty, unlike many of their American settler counterparts. Tecumseh, who was now a well-accomplished warrior and respected leader, would settle in Ohio in the early 19th century. This is where everything would begin to change, and the prophet would be born. Tecumseh's younger brother, named Tenskwatawa, was born in 1775. He was born as Lalawathika, but would later change his name. As he grew up, it was clear that he didn't have the physical prowess of his other siblings like Tecumseh. He wasn't skilled in fighting, and they wouldn't train him to be a warrior. He wasn't skilled with a bow, so he wasn't trained in hunting either. He actually poked out his right eye with a wayward arrow while trying to practice with a bow. Because of this, as he grew up, he became reliant on other members of the Shawnee tribe in order to feed him and his family. He began to turn to alcohol in order to forget his problems. Since he was unable to become a warrior, he began trying to learn from the village's medicine man. However, when the medicine man died in the year 1804, Tenskwatawa was unable to fill his role. He was regarded as little more than a crazy drunkard that was unable to fill the needs of the tribe. But this would soon change in April of 1805. While he was lighting his pipe, he would fall into a deep sleep, a coma of sorts. He was unable to be awoken, and his family had believed that he had died and was beginning to prepare his body for a funeral. That is, until he regained consciousness and claimed that the Master of Life, a deity to the Shawnee tribe, had visited him. He was told that the tribes of Ohio need to unite together and that they need to abandon all Western cultures, technology, and ideals. If they went back to the traditional ways and fought against the settlers, then they would be granted back all of their land, and the Americans would be driven from Ohio. In 1806, he would correctly predict a solar eclipse. To many, this would prove his divine status, and white settlers would begin to call him the Prophet. By 1808, a massive multi-tribal alliance had begun to form. Tecumseh and the Prophet decided that they needed to move to a new location. Between the Wabash and Tippecanoe rivers, Prophetstown was born. Tecumseh began traveling far and wide to recruit natives from a variety of tribes. While he was away on one of these recruiting trips in 1811, the tragedy of Prophet's Rock would finally come to pass. The governor of the Indiana Territory, William Henry Harrison, had planned to march his troops toward Prophettown with the intent of destroying it and crushing this new native confederacy. It was just before the crack of dawn on November 7th of 1811 that the prophet would climb upon this famous rock to give a rousing speech. Despite his brother's orders to not get involved in combat while he was away, the prophet saw no other choice, as U.S. Army troops were marching right on their front door. With his warriors gathered around, he cast a protective spell and told them that they would survive this battle and they would overcome the Army's attack. The American troops stopped just short of the village. Tenskwatawa caught them by surprise and his warriors ambushed them. Ultimately, the native forces weren't able to gain the initiative over the American army. They would be defeated, and there were heavy losses on both sides. Following this, Prophetstown would be burnt to the ground, and the Confederacy would fall apart. Tecumseh, only a year later, would join the British in fighting America during the War of 1812. The Prophet would end up fleeing to Canada after his failure. Despite this loss, the rock is still there. The village known as Battlegrounds would be founded over the ruins of what used to be Prophetstown. In 1929, the General de Lafayette chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution would create a monument to Prophet's Rock. Now that monument and the rock still stands tall near the site of the Battle of Tippecanoe. Undoubtedly, even as centuries pass and everything around it turns to dust, that rock will still be there, a reminder of the great prophet of the Shawnee and Indiana. The Prophet's Rock is a sad but very important place. The history of the Prophet, the Tecumseh War, the Shawnee, shall never be forgotten.
My only regret was playing along. Was I really the only one who could save you from you? I guess it doesn't matter now, even if it were true. Have you gone back to your cowardly ways of love and staying? Are you still waiting to die? Do I still cross your mind? Are you still lying? Are you still lying? Still I'd be there for your last breath. All you'd have to do is call me. I'll be standing by for you. I won't be welcome at your funeral. While I'd like to stay delusional, I had to bury you. Forgive me, I had to bury you.